How come I don't get a greeting like that? You know, it's all right, Joe. I'll say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. I want to begin by thanking our sponsors for this morning. Sure to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Shvat, to thank Bracha Strimber for dedicating all the Shuman Drashos this month in memory of her husband, Avi Strimber, Avraham ben Kálman, Eliezer Halevi, Zichron the Bracha. We open under the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama will have an Aliyah, and the family in Nechama. We thank Avi Tobias for dedicating all the Shuman Drashos this month in appreciation of the Shir and of the Ribbano Shel Olam's incredible Torah. We thank our Day of Learning sponsor, Mr. Lawrence Safnis, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of his beloved wife, Tanya Rosemarin Safnis, Zichron Lebracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, the Neshama will have an Aliyah and the family a Nechama. And with that, let us begin. We have a beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today. Actually, a lot to do today. Today's daf is daf Tes. We are picking up on Ches Amud Beis 8b, and we left off, I believe, at the 2 dots before the Mishnah. So really a lot to do today. Va'aron imameis b'chaser. So remember again, the Mishnah said that halacha l'maisa, you could fashion a coffin on Chalamayid as long as you're doing so in the same courtyard in which the deceased is present. That way, again, people understand that the malacha that you're doing is not for stam malacha, but rather again for the sake of this mace. So the Gemara says, Tanina lehu d'taner habanan osin kol tzarchi hameis. We, in general, in Chalamayid, we take care of all of the needs of the deceased. Gozes in lo saro, we cut his hair. Umechabsin lo ksuso, we launder his clothing. In other words, when we say launder his clothing, if let's say you need tahrichim, if you need a shroud, a clean shroud, in which to bury him, we can go ahead and do that. Va'osin lo aron minisarn haminusar me'erev yamtiv. And we can make a coffin as long as the boards were ready from before Yom Tiv. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, even if you don't have boards, as long as you have cut wood, you can go ahead and fashion them into boards, but you would do so ultimately, again, b'tzina, privately inside of a home. Good Abba say that ends the sugya. The Shulchan Aruch happens to pass in halacha l'maisa in Arachayim, simin taf kuf mem zayin, sif yud, osin kol tzarchei hameis b'chalal shamoed. We ultimately take care of all the needs of the dead on Chalamayid. Now, I will say one thing you can't do is you can't cut down trees in order to make boards to make a coffin. But assuming that the boards, right, the wood is already cut down, you could fashion into a coffin. Again, there are qualifications for that. But I will say, but we do accept the premise of the Mishnah, which is that you can't do anything proactive. So, for example, I can dig a grave on Chalamayid if what? If I need the grave. But it's time to dig graves so that there are graves available. That I cannot do on Chalamayid. Beautiful. Bosai Mishnah, great sugya. Ein nosin nashim b'moed. You can't get married on Chalamayid. Can't get married on Chalamayid, which I will say, if you think about it, what a great wedding time. Right? Chalamayid, right? Anyway, you're not working. Right? Ideally, a person is not working. Can't get married on Chalamayid. Lo besulos, not if it's a besula. Besula literally is a virgin. He's a first marriage. Below almanas, not widows, not a second marriage. Below miyabmin. And you can't do yibum. Why? Mipnei shesimcha hilo. Because it's a simcha. And so we'll see exactly why that's a problem. However, what can you do? Aval machzir hu grushaso. You could, if you divorced your wife, you could remarry her on Chalamayid. Why is that? Rashi says, De'ina simcha kol kach. Okay, it doesn't need such an explanation, right? I guess, come on, right? So it's not such a great simcha, and therefore, again, you could go ahead and do that on Chalamayid. A woman could prepare her adornments. And again, we'll discuss what those tachshitin are. Tachshitin often mean jewelry. But in this context, we're going to see it doesn't just mean jewelry. It means that she's permitted to take care of certain grooming needs on Chalamayid. Yehuda Omer, lo sasud mipnei sheniv hular. Yehuda says she shouldn't go ahead and, we'll say women sometimes used to apply sid, some type of plaster ointment to be used as a depilatory on the face. Rashi says over here, lo sasud besid neshanivahul etzla achshav moed she tasud besid umitztaeres. So she would apply some type of cream on her face. Sid literally is plaster, but it's some type of mixture to remove hair. But the idea is, first of all, when it's on, it doesn't look good, obviously. And it could also be that it was initially taken off, there'd be a reddishness, right? So therefore, because it could make her look unattractive over the course of Chalamayid, she shouldn't do it. The Gemara says, V'hedyo toper kidarko fa'omen machliv. A hedyot, which means a non-skilled individual, is permitted to sew on Chalamayid in a normal fashion. But if someone is a skilled, let's say, seamstress, so what's the right seamstress? I don't know what the male form of a seamstress. Tailor. Thank you. Tailor. Machliv. Machliv means they go ahead and they sew with the shinui. They sew with the shinui, an imprecise stitch. Umisargenes hamitos. You can go ahead and arrange the ropes. Remember again, we've seen this before. That in Mishnaic times, the bed frame was essentially a frame with a series of ropes, right, interlaced ropes, and you'd put the mattress on top of that, so you can make those ropes on Chalamayid. Rabbi Yossi Omer Mimatchin. Rabbi Yossi says we could do it, but we have to do it loosely. Again, we'll define that in the Gemara. So Rabbi say V'chi Simchu Lo My Havi. So Rabbi say the Mishnah said you can't get married on Chalamayid because it's a simcha. So what? So what? What's wrong with it? Right? Is first of all just fakir? It's the opposite. He was speaking extensively about the idea that you can't do things which detract from the simcha of Chalamayid, of simcha of Yamtiv. So again, if getting married causes you simcha, I would think that we should encourage marriage on Chalamayid, to which the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel is incredible. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Oshia, Rabbi Chanina, lefi she'ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. Wow. Now also because you can't mix one simcha with another simcha. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, "De'ima arvin simcha b'simcha kilomar ba'inon delismach b'simchas moed l'chudei." We both say the idea over here is we want you to be b'simcha, but we want your simcha to be the simcha of Yamtiv, and we don't want that simcha mixed with any other simcha. Ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. Then I will say, now you'll ask yourself, what's the svara behind that? The svara behind that is Chazal were concerned that one simcha ends up eclipsing, right, or dominating the other. So the idea is Chazal want us to experience, I will say this goes back very much to Mishnah Yomi also about living in the moment. Chazal want us to experience the simcha of Yom Tiv. And the problem is if I get married, the simcha of marriage, becomes the dominant simcha and eclipses the simcha of Yom Tiv. Therefore, im arvin simcha b'simcha. But say, the Rishonim bring down that this is similar to the concept of ein osin mitzvos chavilos, which is an interesting idea, right? We don't bundle mitzvos, because when you bundle things, you tend to erode the sanctity or the intensity of each experience. Really beautiful. Rabba barafuna amram neishemaniach simchas ragav osei v'simchas ishto. So we have a couple of differences. Rabba says, no, it's not a din of ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha, that you can't mix. Once we will say, which by the way, the concept of ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha, once again, is such a profound yesod about the idea to live in the moment, right? So the idea is it's Yom Tiv, experience Yom Tiv. Experience Yom Tiv. You're getting married, experience the simcha of Yom Tiv. We don't want you bundling experiences because then effectively you really don't experience anything in its totality. I will say, isn't this one of our greatest contemporary challenges? We're never really in the moment. We're never really in the moment, right? When I'm at home, I'm thinking about work. When I'm at work, I'm thinking about home. When I'm at shir, I'm thinking about the meeting. When I'm at the meeting, I'm thinking about mincha. When I'm halavai, we should be thinking about mincha. Right? But you get to we're never really present. We're never really present, right? We know this. A person could spend hours with their family, and yet so little of it is actually quality because I'm not really there. I'm not really there. And Chazal said, experience life, experience the moments. Enjoy the simcha of Yom Tiv to the exclusion of anything else. Enjoy the simcha of the chasana to the exclusion of anything else. Be present. So Rabbah says a little bit differently. Rabbah says, we're concerned about something else. We're concerned that if you get married on Chalamayid, a person is not going to be attentive to the needs of Yom Tiv because they're going to be much more focused on the needs of the chasana. So the Gemara says, Amrali Abai Rav Yosef, Hadira Baravuna, Diravu, the Amrav Daniel Bar Katina Amrav, Minay Sheinos Nashma Moed. So once Rav says the same idea, Shneimar, V'samachta B'chagecha, V'lo B'ishtecha. A person should rejoice in Yom Tiv and not rejoice in his wife. Ula Amar, Ula says, Mipnei HaTorach, because of the exertion. So I will say what's going to end up happening is if a person gets married on Chalamayid, what happens? That's a lot of preparation. That's a lot of tircha. And therefore, what did we say before? You're not allowed to engage in tircha yiseira on Chalamayid. And therefore, a person shouldn't get married on Chalamayid. That's Ula. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha Amar, Mipnei Bittel Pirya Verivya. Both say this is fascinating. So Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha says, no, there's another problem. What's going to happen? You're going to be mevatel, you're going to negate the mitzvah of procreation. Now, what does that mean? This is incredible. So if you look at Rashi, Rashi says, Mishum bitul peri v'rivya, ti shari nisuim b'yamtiv ein adam nose isha kol hashana kula, elamamtin ad hamoed, she osesu da'achas moed nisuim. Let's listen to this. If people know they can get married during Chol Hamoed, they'll say, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? People aren't going to get married during the year. Why not? Chol Hamoed is such a great time to get married, right? First of all, it's Yom Tiv, right? The whole worker should you off from work. Second of all, you already have to make seudos over Yom Tiv. If you already have to make seudos over Yom Tiv, just chaparai, use one of those seudos as your wedding suit, and it's so much easier. So what does it mean? It's going to negate period of rivya. We want people getting married all of the time. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. If you go in and you allow chasanas on Chol Hamoed, they're going to concentrate chasanas over Yamim Tovim. So Sukkot and Pesach, there'll be a heavy wedding volume, and the rest of the year, not so much. This could lead chas v'shalom to a decrease in period of arivia, the Gemara is concerned. Shabbos says, so therefore, which it turns out, we have three different interpretations. Why can't you get married on Chol Hamoed? So number one, ein ma'arvin simcha mesimcha. Number two, mipnei torech tircha yisera. And number three, bittul piria berivia. Says the Gemara Meisvei, kol elu sha'am rasrun lisa b'moed, top of test, mutar lisa erev haregel. So I'll say in all of these situations where we said you're not allowed to get married on Chol Hamoed, you are permitted to get married erev Yom Tiv. I, says the Gemara, kasha l'kulhu, lo kasha, to which the Gemara says doesn't dispose a contradiction to all of the previously espoused opinions, to which the Gemara says no. I'll tell you why. See, here's what's interesting. You would think that according to all of the logic espoused, that you shouldn't be able to get married on erev Yom Tiv either. Because what happens if you get married on erev Yom Tiv, when does Sheva Brachas extend into? Yom Tiv. Yom Tiv. So while it's true that the actual technical marriage has taken place on erev Yom Tiv, Sheva Brachas essentially takes over the entirety of Yom Tiv. Should that not pose all of the previously espoused problems? To which the Gemara says, no, I'll tell you why. L'madar mishum simcha. According to the opinion, it says we don't get married on Chol Hamoed because ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha, ikar simcha chad yomahu. Right? Really, I will say, as much as the Sheva Brachas, the real simcha v'chasana is when? Is the day of the wedding. So as long as the day of the wedding is erev Yom Tiv, that's fine. That's fine. That Sheva Brachas are going to extend on into Yom Tiv, that does not erode the simcha of Yom Tiv. L'madar mishum tircha. The one who's concerned about tircha, the real tircha, right? The real exertion for a chasana is when? The day of the chasana. So as long as it's happening before Yom Tiv, the fact that Sheva Brachas extends into Yom Tiv, we're not worried about tircha. Beautiful. And according to the opinion who says that we're concerned about bittul peri v'rivya, that no one's going to get married during the rest of the year, l'chad yoma lo mashi inish nafshe. See, I both say, at the end of the day, since I can't go ahead and anyway get married on Yom Tiv itself, if all I'm left is one window of erev Yom Tiv, people aren't going to delay weddings throughout the year just for one day. Incredible. So the Gemara says, so we'll say, so therefore it turns out that the Gemara advances three reasons why we don't get married on Chol Hamoed. Number one, ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. We don't want to intermingle the simcha of chasana with the simcha of Yom Tiv, thereby erode each of the simchas. That's really what's happening. Erode simchas Yom Tiv, erode simchas chasana. That's number one. Number two, tircha, the additional effort involved in putting together a chasana on Chol Hamoed. And number three, bittul peri v'rivya, concern that people are only going to get married during this time on Chol Hamoed, and lead to a negation of or diminution of procreation throughout the year. Now, I was saying that out of the three, we're going to see the Gemara really adopts the approach of ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. That's really what the Gemara adopts. So the Gemara said, where do we know that from? From where do you know? I will say, because think about it for just a moment. You can make it a counter argument also. How beautiful is it to bundle simchas, right? To bundle simchas, right? Simchas come. Well, so you see it even like in a smaller context in shul, right? On a Shabbos where there's like a bunch of simchas, it amplifies the atmosphere of simcha. It doesn't diminish at all. You feel like, wow, this is absolutely incredible. So the Gemara says, where do you know the concept of ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha? To which the Gemara says, listen to this. Tichsiv, vayas shlomo ba'isahi esachag, V'chol Yisrael imo kal gadol milavo chamas ad nachal Mitzrayim. So we'll say something about the dedication of the Beis Hamikdash. That when Shlomo HaMelech made a great Yom Tov to celebrate the completion of the Beis Hamikdash, all of Klal Yisrael is with him from Lavo Chamas until Egypt. Lifnei Hashem Elokeinu shivas yamim v'shivas yamim arba asar yom. So we'll say, listen to this. The celebration of the dedication of the Beis Hamikdash was for the 7 days prior to Sukkot. So it was 7 days of celebration for the Beis Hamikdash that then led into the 7 days of Sukkot, for a total of 14 days. V'im Isa, I will say first one line, V'im Isa, Dem Arvin Simcha B'Simcha, Yibai Leila Mintra Adachag, Ume Avid, Shiva Lahacha Ulahacha, because if you were indeed allowed to combine Simchas, then I will say, what should Shlomo HaMelech have done? In other words, remember the Beis Hamikdash, they're celebrating for the 7 days before Sukkot. If you could really combine Simchas, what should Shlomo have done? What should he have done? Do everything together. Because we'll say, especially the Beis Hamikdash, where there's a din of Aliyah L'Regel, people have to come up anyway. So if they're already coming up for Sukkot, just make the 7 days of celebration for the Beis Hamikdash the same 7 days of Sukkot and Shalom HaYisrael. That would be incredible, right? The fact that Shlomo doesn't do that indicates to us what? The fact that he breaks it up and he does 7 days of celebration for the Beis Hamikdash, then 7 days of Sukkot, tells us, Ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. This is the paradigm, which Rabbi says is interesting. So just to point out, this is not a biblical concept. Not a biblical concept, but rather, again, a concept gleaned from Shlomo HaMelech. Says the Gemara, Dilma mintar lo minatриnon. Well, maybe no, it's different, because there you could say that the Beis Hamikdash was already done earlier. So to dafka, like delay a simcha till Yom Tiv, that you can't do. But heicha disrami avdinon. Ultimately, again, but where let's say, so I can see the argument of not delaying a simcha to Yom Tiv, right? Because ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. But maybe when they naturally fall out together, that should be permitted. And along those same lines, ibayli l'shirei purta. Why didn't Shlomo just simply leave a little piece of the Beis Hamikdash unfinished? Right? Just leave something unfinished until Sukkot, finish it on Sukkot, and Shalom HaYisrael. Now you can celebrate everything together. They both say this is so profound. Shiurei binyan Beis Hamikdash lo mishayrinan. They both say you don't leave some part of the Beis Hamikdash unfinished. You don't leave some part of the Beis Hamikdash unfinished. So we're saying on a pashut level, because it'd be disrespectful to the Beis Hamikdash to leave it in a state of disrepair, even for a little bit of time. I will say, but think about the incredible metaphor in this. We know again, I will say, whenever we speak about the Beis Hamikdash, we are reminded of the words Bilvavi Mishkan Evna. Right? There's the Mikdash, there's the Beis Hamikdash that sits on Har HaBayis. There's a Beis Hamikdash in Shalmala, in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's realm, and there's a Beis Hamikdash in my heart. So what does the Gemara say? You don't leave a piece of the Beis Hamikdash unfinished. You don't leave it unfinished. I will say, when we start things in life, all too often, we leave them unfinished. We begin relationships, we don't really put in the requisite effort. We begin projects in life, we don't bring them to fruition. We have ideas, we have dreams, we have aspirations. We get a lot of it done, but then there's that, the last couple of finishing touches never really get done. The Gemara says, Shiurei binyan Beis Hamikdash lo mishayrinan. Don't leave your mikdash unfinished. Whatever you're starting, whatever is worth starting is worth finishing. Whatever is worth doing completely and correctly. Do not leave pieces of your mikdash unfinished. Say, Barile, l'shirei ba'ama kal ya'orev. So I will say, but this one piece you can leave unfinished. I will say, amazingly enough, the Beis Hamikdash had on its rooftop these very sharp metal plates. The point of the sharpened metal plates that had their points pointing upwards is that birds should not nest on top of these. Like you could see, when you go to the Kosel today, they have those Arone Kodesh that they wheel out. They have like those little metal things on top of them. That's not decorative. That's just so birds don't go ahead and nest there. So in the Beis Hamikdash, they have like these sharp metal plates. So why not just leave one of those unfinished? To which the Gemara says, no, because that's also called binyan habayis. That's not decorative. That's not extra. That's part of the mikdash itself. Therefore, you can't leave any part of the mikdash unfinished. So I'll say, so the idea of, so therefore, again, ella midimiyaisakra. So I'll say, rather, the Gemara says, we learn out the concept. So we're trying to bring a raya from Shlomo HaMelech, But at the same time, it's not such a good raya because maybe Shlomo didn't have a choice. In other words, the Beis HaMikdash was completed 7 days before Sukkot. So because it was completed 7 days before Sukkot, that's when he had an obligation to rejoice. But maybe if you have a situation where simchas just happen to coincide, you can go ahead and celebrate them together. Right? The Gemara says no. Ella midmiyaiser kra. There's an extra part in the pasuk. How so? Michti ksiv arbas hayom shivas yom shivas yom ilamali. So we'll say it's interesting. The pasuk says they celebrated for 7 days and 7 days, 14 days. Okay, I didn't pay that much attention in school, but I got this one, right? Why do I have to say 7 days and 7 days, 14 days? So let's listen to this. Shmamina hani lochod v'hani lochod, to teach us a principle that the 7 days of celebration for the Mikdash and the 7 days of Sukkot have to be fundamentally separate. That's what the Mishnah is coming to teach me. Hani lochod v'hani lochod. Ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. You cannot combine one simcha with another simcha. So the Gemara says, Amar Parnach, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Osa says beautiful. So okay, so says just to point out, this is where we learn the concept. The idea of Ein Ma'arvin Simcha B'Simcha comes from Shlomo HaMelech. The idea that they celebrated the Mikdash for 7 days before Sukkot and then celebrated the 7 days of Sukkot separately from that. Says the Gemara Yochanan, Osa Shana Lo Asu Yisrael Yom Kippurim. Wow. It will say that year when they dedicated the Beis HaMikdash under Shlomo HaMelech, they did not observe Yom Kippur as a fast day, which also makes sense if they're celebrating for 7 days before Sukkot, right? What's included in 7 days before Sukkot? Yom Kippur. They did not observe Yom Kippur as a fast day that year. And they thought maybe Chas v'Shalom we did something wrong. Maybe we did something. We'll talk about why they didn't observe Yom Kippur. Maybe we just Mizumanam l'chayei ha'olam haba. We'll say, look how beautiful that is. As they were wearing a baskol, right? The heavenly voice came out and said, all of you have a portion, or literally are invited to the world. We'll say, we should all be zochet here, such a baskol like that. So my darash. So we'll say, why exactly didn't they observe Yom Kippur? In other words, right? What was the drasha? Right? How did they arrive at that halachic conclusion? Amru, Kavachomer, they made a Kavachomer. What's the Kavachomer? Uma Mishkan Shen Kidushas Olam, the carbon Yachidocha Shabbos, Tisser Skila. So I will say by the Mikdash, by the Mishkan. The Mishkan only has a temporal holiness, right? Does not have eternal holiness. Furthermore, again, for the dedication of the Mishkan, you had the karbanos of the Nesiim, the tribal princes, which were individual offerings, and yet all of that was Docha Shabbos. All of that set aside Shabbos. And remember again, violation of Shabbos carries with it an Isser Skila. Mikdash, Dikdushaso Kidushas Olam. The Beis HaMikdash, which has an eternal Kidusha, the Karban Sibor, and ultimately the offerings that are offered there are communal offerings. Yom Kippurim, the Anash Kares. Yom Kippur is Kares, which again, in certain respects, seem to be less Chamer than the Skila of Shabbos. L'kol Shekain. So I will say essentially, if the dedication of the Mishkan set aside Shabbos, the dedication of the Mikdash should set aside Yom Kippur. Ella amai hayu dogim. So if that's the case, sounds like a pretty good Kal V'chomer. Why were they concerned that maybe they did the wrong thing about Yom Kippur? The Gemara says, Hasam tzorech gavoa, hachat tzorech hedyot. Here was the difference. See, I will say by the Mishkan, the violation of Shabbos, so to speak, took the form of offerings, which was a service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Here, the violation of Yom Kippur took which form? The form of Mishteh. Right? They were celebrating. They were eating and drinking. In other words, there wasn't per se a temple service that was Doche Yom Kippur, but rather, again, it was their own personal celebration. So they were concerned after the fact, maybe our personal celebration shouldn't have set aside Yom Kippur. The Gemara says, Mishkan de Dachi Shabbos Minalon. I'm sorry. So the Gemara says, Hachanami me avale avdu mechalo nechlu v'lo lishtu. So by the Mishkan, by the Mikdash, when they consecrated the Beis HaMikdash, why didn't they just do so in the form of karbanos? Why couldn't they just not eat and drink that day of celebration? The website to which the Gemara says something so simple yet profound. Ein simcha below achila ushtiya. Because there's no simcha without eating and drinking. In other words, you want people to feel simcha, there has to be food and drink. Both say incredible. Umishkan the dachi Shabbos minalan. How do we know, by the way, that the dedication of the Mishkan was Docha Shabbos? From where do we know that? Maybe because the pasuk says on the first day and on the seventh day. So we'll say over here, the pasuk is referring to the offerings of the tribal princes. Vahia makriv bayom harishon. That's Nachshon ben Aminadav. the seventh day, Elishama ben Amihud. So pasuk says a first day, seventh day. So we're assuming over here that first day means Sunday, seventh day means Shabbos. So you see that they're offering up individual karbanos even on Shabbos, which teaches us that the dedication of the Mishkan is Docha Shabbos. So Dilma Shvila karbanos. Maybe seventh day doesn't mean Shabbos. Maybe seventh day means what? The seventh day in the order of the offerings. But maybe it doesn't mean Shabbos. To which the Gemara says, Amar Nachman Yitzchak Amar Krab Bayom Ashtei Asar Yom. The pasuk says on the 12th day. So it doesn't really translate well in English. Bayom Ashtei Asar Yom means on the 12th day of that day, or the 12th day, the day of the 12th day. So the Gemara says, why do you have to add in that extra day? Ma Yom Kula Ratzov. Just like ultimately a day is completely continuous, as Rabbi said, there is nothing that breaks the cycle of a day. And so too, the 12 days of the dedication of the Mishkan were completely continuous, which tells us that what? That they brought these karbanos and did this dedication even on Shabbos itself. Maybe it means that they only brought karbanos for the Mishkan on days that were fit to bring karbanos, i.e. every day other than Shabbos. To which the Gemara says, Ksiv Krachin, there's another pasuk. B'yom Shnei Masar Yom. So Rabbi say again, the pasuk once again, same thing. You see the yom, the extra word yom. Ma yom kula ratzov, just like a day is continuous. Af Shnei Masar Yom kulun ratzufin. So too the 12 days of the dedication are completely continuous as well. I v'dilma hachanami yomim haru'uyin. Maybe it's continuous, but it's only continuous the day which is fit to bring a carbon, i.e. every day other than Shabbos. Imkain trei krai lamali. Ultimately, if that's the case, then why would I need two psukim? So I will say, the Gemara is learning out from the extra yom that for the dedication of the Mishkan, the offering, even of the individual tribal, princely offerings, were Docha Shabbos. So you see from the Mishkan, dedication of the Mishkan was Docha Shabbos. They made a Kal V'chomer. If the Mishkan dedication could be Docha Shabbos, I realized I said that wrong. Right, Mishkan is considered to be more chomer than the Mikdash. Remember, because Mishkan number 1 is not eternal, right? Mishkan number 2 ultimately again was individual services, and Mishkan number 3 is Docha Shabbos, which is skila. All of that is more chomer. If that could be Docha Shabbos, certainly the Mikdash, which is eternal, communal offerings, and this kares, which is considered to be a lesser form, because it's not a death sentence at Beis Din Shalmata, all of that could be Docha Shabbos as well. Incredible. Umikdash Docha Yom Kippurim Minalan. So how do you know that the consecration of the Mikdash is Docha Yom Kippurim Ilim Midichsev Arba Asar Yom? Because the pasuk said 14 days. The Dilma Yomim HaReuyim. Maybe only time that the consecration of the Mikdash went on was days in which it was fit to happen. But maybe they fasted on Yom Kippur, to which the Gemara says, Gamar Yom Yom Ehasu. Make the same drush of Yom Yom from the Mishkan. Just like Yom by the Mishkan means continuous, so too Yom by the Mikdash means continuous as well. So they ate on Yom Kippur, both sides. The year that they dedicated the Mishkan under Mikdash, the base of Mikdash, they ate and they drank on Yom Kippur. And the Baskel came out and said, Kulchem mizuman lechaye olam haba. You're all invited to olam haba. Uminalan da'achiluhu. But say, how do we know that ultimately they were forgiven? The Tani tachlifa b'yom hashmini shalach es ha'am vayivarchu es hamelech. So say, listen to how beautiful this is. On the 8th day, so remember again, they're celebrating for 7 days prior to Sukkot. Then on the 8th day, Shlomo HaMelech sent them home. Shalach es ha'am vayivarchu es hamelech. Everybody blessed the king, Shlomo, before they took leave of him. Vayelchu li ohalehem. They went to their tents. Smeichim v'tovei leiv. Happy, great, glad of heart. Al kol hatova she'asa Hashem leDavid avdo u'li Yisrael amo. They were glad over all of the great things, the tova, the good, that Hashem did for David, the servant of Hashem, and for Klal Yisrael. So the Gemara says, li ohalehem. What does it mean they went to their tents? Shahalchu umatzu nashim b'tara. They found that their wives were in a state of ritual purity, in which case, again, intimacy was permitted, so they were able to be with their wives. Shenagu, so the Gemara says, smeichim, they were happy. Shenanu izvashchina. So what it's describing over here is an incredible state of physical and spiritual joy. So there was physical joy in that, again, they were able to experience marital intimacy. There was spiritual joy because they had benefited from the Shechina. V'tovei leiv, and glad of heart, shekol echad ve'echad nis'abra ishto beben zachar. So he calls it an incredible miracle that all the women who became pregnant became pregnant with sons. Al Kolatova, and they're glad for all of the good that was visited upon them. The good is a reference to the Baskol that came out and said, you are all invited to Olam Haba. So in other words, the Baskol came out and said that I'm happy you ate on Yom Kippur. I'm happy you drank on Yom Kippur. The celebration, your cheshbon was correct to set aside Yom Kippur for the celebration of the dedication of the Beis HaMikdash. So let's listen to this. L'David Avdol Yisrael Amo. So what does it mean that they were happy for the simcha of David, the servant of Hashem, and for Klal Yisrael? Bishlam Ali Yisrael Amo Da'achlu Avin Yom Kippurim. So I understand why there was a simcha for Klal Yisrael. What was the simcha for Klal Yisrael? So of course, I know what's based on simcha for Klal Yisrael is the Beis HaMikdash. Also, the simcha for Klal Yisrael is that Hashem had indicated that all was forgiven for having celebrated on Yom Kippur. But what does it mean? Why is David HaMelech part of this story, right? Why is David HaMelech part of the simcha of the Beis HaMikdash? Listen to how beautiful this is. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, B'shasha b'kishno lahachnis ar lemikdash. When Shlomo Melech wanted to come into the Beis HaMikdash, so the Beis HaMikdash is complete. They wanted to bring the Aron, the Ark, into the Beis HaMikdash itself, to put it in the holy place, put it in the Kodesh HaKodashim. Listen to this. Davku sha'arim zelazeh. The gates of the Beis HaMikdash would not open. They would not open. Amar Shlomo esrim v'arba renanos. Shlomo said 24 supplications. V'lo nane. He was not answered. Pasach v'amar su'ushar roshechem. V'lo kevan sha'amar. Hashem. So can you imagine this scene? They spent all of this money, all of this time creating and building the Beis HaMikdash. Now, finally, the culmination is the bringing of the Aron into the Mikdash, and the gates of the Mikdash will not open. They won't open for Shlomo. They won't open for David. Excuse me, for the Aron. What happens? Finally, Kevan Shamar Hashem Elokim. Atasheth Pnei Mishichecha. Shlomo finally says, Ribono Shel Olam, do not turn away the face of your anointed one. Zachra lechasde David avdecha. Remember me in the merit of David your servant. Miyad na'aneh. As soon as Shlomo brought up, as soon as he invoked the memory of his father, as soon as he brought up David HaMelech, do this in the merit of David, his tefillos were answered. And Abba said the gates swung wide open. Ba'osasha nepchu pnei sonei David kishulei gedera. In that moment, David HaMelech's antagonists, of which there were many, their face became blackened like the bottom of a pot. V'yadu akol shemachal HaKadosh Baruch Hu la'osa avon. See, Rabbi say, David HaMelech lived his life in the shadow of the event with Bathsheba. And although HaKadosh Baruch Hu forgave him, told him his forgiveness, Nasan HaNavi told him, you're forgiven, people humiliated David HaMelech over this, and never believed that he was truly a chosen king, and never believed that he was a father of a dynastic monarchy. In this public event, where the gates only opened for the schus of David HaMelech, everyone saw that David was forgiven. This was a moment of personalistic redemption for David HaMelech, and a moment where Klal Yisrael saw, in an uncontestable fashion, David Malka Meshicha, that David HaMelech was truly the chosen one by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You know, say, it's such a tragic end to a story, because sometimes you have to wait a long time to attain forgiveness. And sometimes it's even past your own lifetime that you have to wait for forgiveness. But for those who truly want forgiveness, and for those who are truly willing to work for forgiveness, forgiveness always comes. You just sometimes have to be a little bit patient. Such an incredible idea. So the Gemara goes weiter. Rabbi Yonasan ben Amsai, Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim, Tanu Parshas Dar Bei Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It's an incredible story. So Rabbi Yonasan ben Amsai and Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim. Rashi says he was called Ben Gerim because he was a descendant of converts. They're learning the parsha of Nadarim at the house of Rashbi, Rav Shema Yochai. If Termine Ba'arta, so they went ahead and they were taking leave of him in the evening. Let's Safra Hadar become after Mine. I will say, when you take leave of your Rebbe, you're supposed to, you don't just walk out, right? You give him shalom, he gives you shalom, gives a bracha. So they took leave of him, they took leave of Rashbi at night. The next morning, they came to take leave of him again. Amrlahu, Valav after Risu, Mini Ba'arta. So Rashbi said, didn't you guys say goodbye to me last night? Amrlahu, Lamaratanu Rabbeinu, Talmud Shiniftar Merabah, Valan Ba'arta Ba'ir, Valan Ba'osa Ha'ir, Tzarach Liftar Mimeno Pamachar, Shneamar, Bayom Hashmini Shalach HaSa'am, Vayvarchu HaSa'amelech Uksiv, Bayom Esrim Shlosh L'chodesh Hashvi Shalach HaSa'am, Elamikan, L'Talmud HaNiftar Merabah, Valan Ba'osa Ha'ir, tzarach liftor imenu pam achar. So, well, Rebbe, you taught us based on the pasuk by Shlomo HaMelech that even if you say goodbye to your Rebbe, you take leave of your Rebbe at night. If you end up sleeping in that same city that night, you should what? Take leave of him again the next morning. Proper derech eretz. Proper derech eretz. So the Gemara says, Amalei Lebrei. So let's listen to this. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said to his son, Bnei Adam halalu anashim shel tzurahim. These men who are learning by me, Rabbi Yonasan Amsai and Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim, these are men of tzura. It's interesting. I will say tzura means form. Rashi says chachamim. Tamdi chachamim. These are Torah scholars. These are Torah scholars. Zil gabehon delivrucha. Go to them and get a bracha. So I'll say this is Rashbi saying to his son Rebbe Lazar, go to these two rabbanim, Rabbi Yonasan ben Amsai and Rabbi Yehuda ben Gerim. They're Talmidei Chachamim. Go to them and get a bracha. Good. So I'll say, so what happens? Zil gabehon delivrucha. So Azal ashkechinu de karami kraya adadi. So Rebbe Lazar the son, goes and finds these two rabbanim engaged in a Torah discussion. They're contrasting psukim. What do the psukim say? Ksiv. Well, this is very profound. The pasuk over here says, Palis ma'agal raglecha v'chol d'rechecha yikonu, which literally means weigh your steps, and all of your pathways should be measured. Uksiv orach chayim al tzefales, and then the pasuk says, the pathway of your life do not weigh. Now we'll say, now what does this mean? What does this mean? So we'll say, take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Palis ma'agal raglech. What does it mean to weigh? To weigh the pathways of your life. Kilomar shakol mitzvos va'ayin bahen ve'eza mitzvah gedolah va'asiyas hagdolah. Both listen to this. So weigh the derech of your life means as follows. When you are faced with the opportunity to do two mitzvahs, so we'll say, which one should you do? Which one should you do? So the pasuk says in Mishlei, weigh them. In other words, figure out which is the greater mitzvah, perform the greater mitzvah, and leave aside the other mitzvah. And then the second pasuk says, don't weigh, right? Arachayim pentefales. Don't weigh the pathways of your life, which seems to indicate that what? Don't start choosing mitzvahs. Rather, what should you do? Whatever opportunity comes your way first, seize it. Seize it. Seize it. I say. So which one is it? I'll say, so which one is it? So when two opportunities come my way, should I weigh them and take the greater one, leave aside the secondary one? Or should I just take whatever comes my way? To which the Gemara says, lo kasha. So say, now listen to this. When should you weigh it? When there are two mitzvahs, and I know that whichever one I don't do, someone else will pick up the slack. Great. Choose the greater opportunity. Choose a greater opportunity. So, right? So the kan the other one is a situation of a mitzvah that cannot be done by someone else. You know, we'll say, if a mitzvah can't be done by someone else, therefore what? Do whatever comes to your hand first. So we'll say, by the way, it's an incredibly profound idea. When I know that there are two opportunities and the one I don't take, someone else is going to pick up the slack. So the Gemara says, choose the greater opportunity. But when there are two mitzvahs, and again, whatever I don't do is not going to get done, in that case, don't start choosing. Just do whatever you can first. Just do whatever you can first. So incredible. So I have so much to say about that, but no time right now. So the Gemara says, Hadir Yasi v'kami bariluhu. So we'll say, so now these two rabbanim are still sitting and learning. Ksiv yikarihi mipninin b'chol chafatzecha lo yishvu ba. So we'll say, it says, it is more precious than pearls, and nothing else is valuable when compared to it. So we'll say, this is talking about Torah. Torah is more valuable than anything. So we'll say, but what it makes it sound like is there's no material possession that is comparable to Torah, but mitzvos perhaps are as valuable as Torah. Uksiv kol chafatzim lo yishvu ba, ta'afilu chaftei shemaim lo yishvu ba. Then another pasuk says, nothing holds value when compared to Torah, which sounds like what? Even mitzvos. Even mitzvos. We'll say, by the way, what a fundamental question, right? How do you compare mitzvos to Torah? Right? Are mitzvos just as powerful as Torah, or just as important as Torah, or are even mitzvos not as important as Torah itself? To which the Gemara says, not a contradiction. Kan b'mitzvah shev shel asos de'achirim, kan b'mitzvah shev shel asos de'achirim. What's the same answer? When there's a choice between learning Torah and doing a mitzvah, so if there's no one else to do the mitzvah, I should put down the Torah and do the mitzvah. But if there's someone else to do the mitzvah, then einachinami, I could continue in my learning and allow someone else to go ahead and do the mitzvah. So I will say, you see this theme that like when I know that there are other partners in the process, I can go ahead and engage in one thing to the exclusion of something else, because I know someone else is going to pick up the slack. But at the end of the day, when there is no other synergistic partner, I have to do whatever I need to do in the moment I need to do it. So, right, so now when there's someone else, I can start making these analyses in terms of mitzvahs. Yes mitzvah, no mitzvah, do this mitzvah, don't do that mitzvah. I can start making those shikulim. When there's no other partner, do whatever is within reach right now. Torah, mitzvahs, ultimately, again, when halacha l'maisa, there's someone else to do the mitzvah, I can engage in the Torah. When there's no one else to do the mitzvah, close the Gemara, do the mitzvah. I will say now again, how to apply these types of concepts in real life is a bit more complicated, but l'maisa, you begin to see this motif that Chazal are highlighting, which is when the job needs to get done and there's no one else to do it, do it. Do it. Bigger mitzvah, smaller mitzvah, Torah mitzvah, do it. Do it. When there are other partners, then you have the luxury of kind of strategically thinking who should do what. So I'll say, Amrulay, my Ba'isach, so I'll say, so remember again, they're having this discussion, these two Rabbanim, and who's sitting there the whole time? Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So they turn and they say, who are you? Right? What are you doing here? Right? What are you doing? My Ba'isach, what are you doing here? Amrlahu, Damrli Abba Zilgabad Bracha. My father told me to come and get a bracha from you. I will say, get ready for this. Amrulay, they say, you want a bracha? Here you go. Yehei Rava de Tizra v'lo techzad. First part of the bracha, you should be zocheh to sow and never reap. Ta'ayil v'lo tapak, you should go in and never come out. Teipuk v'lo ta'ayil, right? Come out and not go in. Lechrav beisach v'leisav ushpizach, your home should be destroyed and you should dwell in an inn. Lebalbel pesurach, your table should be uprooted. V'lo techsi shasacharata, and you should never see a new year. Wow. Kiyasa legabe abua, Rabbi Elazar comes back home. Amarle, so his father said, how did it go? Right? So Amarle, lo mi boy de bruche lo berchan. Father, not only did I not get a bracha, but this was like the worst experience of my life. About they gave me tsar. In other words, if they would have just said, okay, hatzlacha rabba, fine, okay, go ahead, right? Not only did they not give me a bracha, they caused me so much pain. Amarle my amrulach. So Rashbi says to his son, tell me, my son, what did they tell you? Let's talk this. What did they tell you? So Hachi V'Hachi Amrulay. So Rabbi Elazar said, I'll tell you everything. Amrulay Hanach Kulu Birchasaninu. No, don't be upset. These are all brachas. We'll say, watch this. This is so beautiful. Tizra v'lo titztad. What does it mean? You should sow and never reap. Tolid banim v'lo yamusu. It means you will have children, and your children will not predecease you. So you'll sow, but you'll never reap, right? The children will be born, but ultimately, again, they'll never, right? The harvesting is a reference to death. Your children will outlive you. Ta'ayo v'lo sepuk. What does that mean? Ultimately, you'll go in and you won't come out. Ta'ayo kalsa v'lo lemos banach delifkun. It means your sons will get married, and when it's customary that when a son got married, the daughter-in-law would come to live with her husband's family. It means your daughter-in-laws will come into your home, and they won't leave, meaning your sons won't die. Because sometimes, chas v'shalom, if a husband died, the widow didn't stay in her in-laws' house. She went out. So they'll come in and they won't leave. In other words, a reference to the idea that your sons will live. Teipuk v'lo ta'ayil. What does it mean? Ultimately, again, they'll go out and they won't come in. Tolid bansa, you'll have daughters. They'll get married. They'll go to their in-laws' house. V'lo yamusu gubrayi v'lo hajachas. So they'll go in to their in-laws' house, and they won't come out. In other words, their husbands won't chas v'shalom die, and your daughters won't come back home. Lechrov beiseif v'leshev uspizech. Your home will be destroyed, and you'll dwell in an inn. Tahai alma uspizech. This world is like an inn, and the world to come, vahi alma beisa. The world to come is your real home. Dichsev kirbam batemo li olam al tikri kirbam ela kivram. I say the idea over here is something very profound. The idea is when they're saying that your home will be destroyed and ultimately again you'll live in an inn. What they're saying is you'll live the kind of life where your permanent domicile is not in this world. In other words, you'll live a life where you'll recognize that everything in this world is fleeting, and that ultimately, again, the only real home is the home in Olam Haba. I will say, sometimes in life we get so caught up in this world that we forget that this world is but an inn. It's a hotel. And there's check-in and there's check-out, right? And I will say, in a hotel, it's interesting, no one ever goes into a hotel room and says, you know what? I don't like the way this is laid out, right? I'm going to put the picture here. I'm going to move this. I brought my own towels. I brought this. In a hotel, you recognize this is temporary. This is temporary. So I'm going to enjoy it. Everyone likes staying in a nice hotel, right? So I'm going to enjoy the hotel, but I also recognize that it's temporal. And therefore, I don't really get caught up in many of the features. This world is a hotel. Do I enjoy it? Of course, I enjoy it very much. Is there much to enjoy? There's so many great amenities in the resort of life. It's fantastic. But that's what it is. It's a hotel. And there's a check-in and there's a check-out. And I both say, why do you go to a hotel? Usually you go to a hotel because there's a destination you want to get to, right? The ikar is not the hotel. The ikar is where I'm going. So same thing in life. The ikar is not the hotel. The ikar is the destination. The destination is Olam Haba. The goal is the hotel is a fantastic base of operations, right? I want a nice hotel because I want a good place to sleep. I want a good place to eat. I want to be able to relax. But the goal is not the hotel. The goal is everything around the hotel. I will say, what an incredible metaphor. So life is the hotel. No one just stays in the hotel the whole time, right? You want to go something, you want to go somewhere, you want to do something. So that's what they said. Your home should be destroyed and you should live in a hotel. There you should live in an inn. That you should live a life where you realize you're just passing through. You're checking in, you're checking out. And the goal is to maximize the attractions of your destination, right? Don't spend the whole time in the hotel. Go out, do whatever you want to go out, accomplish, and recognize that the real permanent domicile is Olam Haba. Incredible. So the Gemara says, Lebalbel. So again, close to the pasuk. Lebalbel pisorach. Your table should be uprooted. What does that mean? Literally, it doesn't mean uprooted. It means your table should be a balagan, right? Your table should be a lebadig, right? Bilbul, all mixed up. First white line, bibani ubansa. You should always have children yelling at your table, right? I will say we forget that sometimes that's a bracha, right? The idea is that there should always be a commotion by your table. It means that there should always be sons and daughters by your table. What does it mean? You shouldn't see a new year. It means your wife should not die and you shouldn't remarry a new wife. Rabbi say it's quite profound. So that you should not see a new year is a reference to your present wife dying and marrying a new wife. The wife that you have should be Emir Hashem, the wife that you grow old with. So Rabbi say, how incredible, right? So yeah, so remember again, I will say these brachas, which look like anything other than brachas, yet most magnificent brachas given to Rabbi Eliazar. So profound. Rav Shimon Chalafta, if terminated, Rav Shimon Chalafta was taking his leave of Rav Amarle, Avu Amarle, Zil Lagabe de Librach. So listen to this. So ultimately, again, Rav Shimon Chalafta is taking his leave from Rav, and he says to him, go to him to go and get a bracha. So what's the bracha? Amarle Yehe Rava, Shebi Hashem's will, Delo Tivayesh, Velo Tisbayesh. I will say incredible. What's the bracha? The bracha is, should be the will of Hashem, that you should never be embarrassed, and you should never be the cause of someone else's embarrassment. Wow. I'll say, what a bracha. What a bracha. Never be embarrassed in life and never be the cause of someone else's embarrassment. Asu gabe avua. He came to his father. Amalei, my Amarlecha. What did he tell you? What was the bracha? Amalei milin ba'al mahuda Amalei. He said to me some nice words. In other words, he wasn't so impressed with the bracha. Amalei beirachacha birchasa de berchan kutshabricha li Yisrael. No, you don't understand. The bracha he gave you was the very bracha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to Klal Yisrael. So the Gemara says, "V'tana be'dichsiv v'achaltem echov v'savoa v'hilaltem v'lo yevoshu ami liolam." Both say, what's the bracha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us? You should never be embarrassed. V'lo yevoshu ami liolam v'yadatem ki b'kerev Yisrael ani v'lo yevoshu ami liolam. So I will say, ultimately, again, the bracha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives Klal Yisrael is that you should never be humiliated and you should never be the source of someone else's humiliation. I will say, what a profound and beautiful bracha. That's the bracha that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us. And that's ultimately the bracha that Rav gave to Shimon Chalafta as well. Incredible. Osi Isha, I will say so much more to say about this, but again, let's go back to a little bit. Osi Isha Takshita. So remember again, the Mishnah said that a woman could go ahead and take care of her takshit and take care of her needs. Right? Literally, again, accessories on Yom. These are the takshitim of Nashim. Kocheles, upokeses, umavir sak me'alpanel. So I'll say ultimately again, what does it mean? It means halacha lemaisa. Actually, we'll say, you know what, we'll stop over here for today. We'll stop at this two dots. Emir Hashem, stop here. Again, pick up with the halacha concerning chalamayda. We'll say, what a way to go into Shabbos Kodesh, right? What a daf of Gemara. Shkoyach. Beautiful.
What a way to go to Shabbat.
Right? Baruch Hashem. Mazel tov. Mazel tov. Mazel tov.